This is an interview with somebody who's been both a friend and a mentor to me as I've gone through the experience of becoming a coach myself. Please enjoy this conversation with the incredibly successful, extremely calm, and very wise Coach Chris Patterson. Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Josh, for having me.
First, I gotta ask if you can just show off a little bit.
Okay.
Tell us some of the things that you've done.
Some of my accomplishments, I assume?
Yeah.
All right. You knew that was going to be tough for me starting off, so I'll go ahead and do it anyways. I don't like getting into all those things, but I'll start off by saying I'm just a guy from Windsor, Ontario, Canada. Played secondary football there, and over the years, I've had some amazing things happen to me. So probably most notably, by chance encounter, we can get into this a little deeper. I got mentored by a gentleman named Zig Ziglar. That was back in 1997, and I spent time with him every week, either at the gym or going to lunch or at his church, listening to him speak. And it was definitely the most life-changing time of my existence. From that, because I had changed and done so well with his teachings, I built a business. So I own a company called Interchanges. It's 22 years old, and I started it out of my wife's dining room. By the way, the reason I know it was my wife's dining room is because she kept saying, "You got to get the heck out of my dining room." So we figured it out clearly. All right, it was her dining room. I finally got out. But 22 years later, I'm very proud of the number, $1.6 billion that we've generated for our clients. And the reason I'm proud of it, because we've made a difference for real live human beings. And I've got a great team that's been working with me. I've got 160 people that work with me all over the world. I also own a software company called White Label Chats. So I've got those two brands, Interchanges, the chat software, but most of my time, almost 100% of my time now is focused as a performance coach. So I'm very passionate about sharing what I've learned from Zig Ziglar and Bob Proctor, and then all my other experiences and all of my failures. I've got plenty of those. But hopefully that catches you up to where we're at today.
Yeah, I wanted to establish that context from the front.
Okay.
Because you've done a lot, and it's very impressive.
Well, thank you.
And, speaking with you, myself, it's been always a gift and incredibly helpful for me. So I just wanted to start from that context. And then from there, I think it provides a good perspective to then ask you the question. When you were 25, everything was going right, obviously. Like, you were making all of the right decisions and doing everything right. Otherwise, you never would have built a business like this, correct?
So Josh has information that you guys don't. That's why he's being sarcastic right now. So the reality is, I like to say, by the time I was 25 years old, I was a self-made man. And boy, you should have seen what a mess I made of myself. I had literally made so many wrong decisions. And, the typical stuff. You're 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, and you're just getting into all kinds of things you shouldn't be getting into. All the temporary gratification, the drinking and the drugs and the chasing girls and the bad attitude and all those things, in the wrong way, it really led to eventually a massive depression. I went through a season of loss. I lost the girl. I lost the business. I lost my money. I lost my self-esteem. And, by the time I was 25 years old, I just, I thought it was over. I literally thought I was done. I definitely had suicidal thoughts. Things had gotten so bad. But the worst thing was that I had lost control of my mind. And I didn't realize that could happen. But I literally had the serotonin deplete in my mind, really a physical ailment. And that turned into, the mental psychosis of depression. And I spent about a year, maybe a year and a half, battling that. And it was literally minute by minute, day by day, just trying to get through each day. It was so bad. Not too long after that, I got a phone call from my dad when I was 25 years old. And I woke up, and of course I was hungover, probably 11, 12 in the morning. And he says, son, how would you like to go to a success seminar? And I kind of, me and my bad attitude, my ego, said, what's that going to do for me? And that's a waste of time. And, I'm thinking all these crazy things.
It's 1 p.m. in the morning. I've got things to do.
Yeah. I was just a hot mess. So I looked around my room, and there was a pile of dirty clothes in one corner and ashtrays and beer cans in another. And worst of all, I was sleeping on one of those futons that starts out a foot thick and ends up about 2 inches when you're done with it, right? And I thought, you know what? I'm not really killing it here in life. I guess I got nothing to lose. I'll at least get to spend some time with my dad. So he took me over to the Palace of Auburn Hills. And we were up in the nosebleed section. We heard several people come out and speak. I wasn't all that impressed. But then there was a man that came out on stage, and he started saying things I'd never heard before. You can have everything you want in life if you'll just help enough other people get what they want. And the place was electric. And he was marching up and down, back and forth on the stage. And everyone was just going crazy. I looked over at my dad. I said, Dad, who in the world is this guy? And he said, son, if you're not going to pay attention to anybody today, make sure you pay attention to him. His name is Zig Ziglar. And I did. And I got his tapes. And long story short, through the process of listening to those over and over again, autosuggestion is what we call it, I started to change my life, and things really did turn around.
What gave you the drive to actually decide to do it? What gave you the drive to go, you know what, I should listen to this guy, I should learn this stuff?
So I've learned over the years, motivation comes from one of two places, either inspiration or desperation. I was certainly both. I was, excuse me, I was inspired to no longer be desperate. And, I'd gone through such a rough patch, such a rough season, that I was like, I think what happened in that moment, and for me it was a moment, it was a life-changing moment, sitting in that stadium, listening to this man say things that were contrary to the way that I thought. And the spark for me was a little word called hope. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had hope. I felt like this man on stage might know a lot more than I do, and he might know the direction that's better for me, even better than I think I know what's best for me. So, I think in life, it's really easy to be a critic. It's really easy to go, oh, that's not for me, or that's a waste of time, that's a waste of money, that's a waste of whatever. But I was glad that I made the decision to put my ego aside and all my criticism aside and go, you know what? Let me just listen to these tapes. And by the way, I'm 54 years old. If you guys don't know what tapes are, they're called cassette tapes. We used to have to wind them up with our baby finger and our number 2 pencil, and you guys have no idea what life was like as you're watching this digital download. So, yeah, it was really just a matter of, I got nothing to lose. This is the only open door, is this information. Yeah. So why not follow through and see where it goes?
So I want to continue with your story, but I want to ask, what's your relationship with hope now? To me, I think hope is critical. I think hope is an absolutely necessary thing to manufacture if it's not in your life. I think it's a really big deal. Do you still utilize it? Is it a piece that you think is important?
There's different theories on setting goals and having a plan for your life and that type of thing. I can't speak for everybody, but I found for me, the more clarity I have of what I want in life, tapping into my desire, the more that I can have that documented and just have something, a North Star to shoot for, right? And that gives me hope. I'm also a man of faith, so I certainly have, faith in God, which gives me faith in me. I believe I and my Father are one. I believe he lives with me, in me. So it gives me a lot of hope to go, I am the head and not the tail. I am above and not beneath. I think it's just a healthy self-esteem to go, what I can accomplish. And it's not always been that way for me. There's been many, many, many dark periods of time in my life, in my 20s, in my 30s, in my 40s, even in my 50s. And I always come back to, if I can get crystal clear as to what I want in life, and it's morally and ethically appropriate, and I can do all these things with integrity, that gives me a lot of hope to get up in the morning and let's go for it. Now, sometimes the goals are big, so I'll admit they're a little scary, but they're also exciting. And I think when you can combine excitement with a little bit of fear, it can give you a lot of hope. And that's where I am now.
So you started listening to these tapes and things started to change in your mind. What did you start to do?
I'm glad you asked that. That's funny. I don't know if I've ever shared this before, but my favorite Aunt Sue. Hi, Aunt Sue. Aunt Sue used to take me to coffee, and I guess she was my first therapist.
Yes.
She taught me how to drive. I almost ran over a couple people. Sorry, Aunt Sue. And we used to go to this coffee shop, and she would always buy because I was always broke. And I remember after listening to all these cassette tapes from Zig, I got super excited. The pistons were going off. Things were moving in the right direction. And I got so excited, I called her and I said, hey, I got something to show you. So we met at the coffee shop. I sat down, and on a napkin, I had written down, I'm going to move to Florida, and I'm going to get a great job, and I'm going to own my own business, and I'm going to have employees, and I'm going to drive a really fancy car. I don't know what that is yet, but it'll be fancy. And I'm going to have a nice home, and I'm going to get married, and I'm going to have 3 kids. And she looked at it, and in the nicest way possible, she said, Chris, have you lost your marbles? I said, what are you talking about? And she says, well, you don't even have 50 cents to buy these donuts. And I was like, no, I get it. I understand it too. But. And, in fairness, if she was looking at my circumstances, she was 1,000% right.
Mm-hmm.
What she could not see, which isn't her fault, but what she couldn't view was the passion that was in my heart at that point, the desire. So I think she had great intentions, trying to talk me off the quote-unquote ledge. But something incredible happened, because that same year I moved to Florida, and I ended up getting a really good job. And I ended up getting promoted 4 times in the first year. And the previous year, I'd been fired from 4 different jobs. So I went 4 for 4 as a loser, and then all of a sudden a year later I went 4 for 4 as a winner. What changed? It was the information that was going into my mind. See, we are where we are in life because of the information that's gone into our mind. We can change where we are, and more importantly, we can change who we are by changing the information that goes into our mind. That's why people listen to you. That's why I think people listen to me. It's because they're trying to change the dialogue that's going on inside their minds. And when I had started accomplishing all of these goals and I started hitting all my metrics, I remember I got a phone call from my Aunt Sue. She said, Chris, I'm going to be in Florida. And I remember picking her up, and I picked her up in a fancy car. I was driving a Bentley Continental GT, and obviously the nicest car I'd ever owned in my life, and I still pinched myself that I was even able to buy that. And then I brought her to my office, and I introduced her to some of my employees. And then I brought her to my nice home and introduced her to my wife and my 3 kids. And I remember there was a point where her jaw dropped, and she said, Chris, do you still have it? I said, have what? She says, the napkin. The napkin. Do you still have the napkin? And unfortunately, I didn't. But both of us had the memory of what was written on that napkin. And that's why I think it's just so critically important for anyone. Write down what you want. Just do that. You don't have to believe it's going to come true. But just write it down. Start there. And then maybe, just maybe, if you get a the spirit's moving right, or you're feeling good one day, or the coffee's kicking in, maybe try to do a few tasks regarding a couple of those goals that you just wrote down. And just keep doing that. One of the very practical tips that I love to give to people is what I call my top 5. A lot of people, can feel stuck. But, if you write down just 5 priorities that you want to get accomplished tomorrow, chances are pretty high you're going to get 2 or 3 or 4, even 5 of those done. But if you do that 5 days a week, let's just say Monday through Friday, and you're writing down real priorities, things that are going to move the needle, things that are going to change your life, those 5 a day turn into 25 a week. Those 25 priorities in a week turn into 100 a month. And those 100 priorities over a year is 1,200 priorities. If you're actually doing those, or half of those, or a third of those, it's impossible for your life not to change. But just start with writing down 5 things you can do tomorrow. I learned from somebody recently, take the next pathetic step. It was him, guys. That was him. But I think that's a really good way to start. Write down what you want, ideally, in life. Okay, maybe you don't believe you can get it. But then go back down to the micro and write down 3 or 4 or 5 things you can do tomorrow towards those. And just keep on. See what happens.
Before you wrote those things down, you went through this experience of having seen Zig Ziglar and then playing these tapes over and over again. And this is really common, right? Like many people have had success, have done something mentally oriented that is repetitive.
Mm-hmm.
Tim Ferriss listened to the Tony Robbins tapes in his terrible van driving to work or whatever over and over and over again, famously, and many other stories like this. And it's funny. And I listened to almost all of the Tim Ferriss show, so
Right.
I guess I did it as well. But there seems to be often a discomfort around the idea of listening to ideas repetitively, right? So to take it to a more extreme version, like let's say mantras or affirmations, that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. And there's many times when it makes me uncomfortable, even though I know it works. I think, oh, this is cheesy. Oh, this is cliche. This is silly.
Wasting my
this
time.
is weird. Wasting my time.
Yeah.
All these sorts of thoughts. But I think we have undeniable evidence at this point, over and over again, that people have succeeded through some form of this. If somebody is uncomfortable with the idea of repeating ideas that go into their minds, what would you say to make that seem like a more realistic thing to do?
So the reality is we're already replaying ideas all day, every day anyways. I remember I was talking to, I actually ended up meeting Ziglar. That's a whole different story. He mentored me for 12 months. But he asked me to listen to a new set of tapes, and he said, I want you to listen to these 16 times. And jokingly, I looked across the coffee table and I said, Zig, I said, what are you trying to do, man? Brainwash me? And like Zig, he was very measured, and he took a second and he thought for a moment. And then he came back and he said, son, as much as I've learned about your brain, it could use a good washing. So neuroscientists have discovered that 96% of our thoughts are exactly the same day over day. Same as they were yesterday, as they were a week ago, as they were a month ago, as they were 10 years ago. And that's called typical masses thinking. 99% of our society operates that way. They just let their old mind kind of control them, right? Well, that controls our feelings too, and it also controls our actions. The better we think, the better we feel, the better we act, and the results come out of that as well. So doing something new generally makes us uncomfortable. If it's outside of our comfort zone, then it's supposed to be uncomfortable. And certainly listening to the same information over and over and over, it doesn't make any sense. We've been programmed through school to read a book and throw it on the shelf. That's it. And to say, well, why don't you read it 3 or 4 or 5 or 15 times? Well, people would say, that's nuts. Why would I do that? That's not my programming. That's not what I've learned over the years. So when you start to learn how the 1% think, the 1% that's wealthy and healthy and happy and thriving and influence and everything else, you start to realize those people typically, yeah, they're readers. But usually they'll find the 1 or 2 or 3 books that really make an impact, and they'll read them over and over again for a year. I've got a friend of mine, he's got hundreds of millions of dollars. He said, I max out at four books a year. He said, because I'm not interested in reading it. I'm interested in understanding it. If we want to understand a new thing, then we need the repetition. Napoleon Hill, in his blockbuster book, Think and Grow Rich, has a term called autosuggestion. And after interviewing 500 of the most influential, wealthiest people on the planet, realized that a high majority of them would either write down the same information over and over again, journaling, or they would listen to the right information over and over. They would read the right information over and over again. So to answer your question, it's normal to feel awkward, but don't let that stop you from winning. And that's really what this is. It's a hack to winning in life. And if we can see the right image in our mind, we can hold it in our hands. But sometimes we have to put the right image there through that autosuggestion.
I'm more and more interested in repetition. It's something that plays out in different ways all over the place. And I think about it in music, since I got my music background, is the repetitive aspects of a piece of music don't make a piece of music boring. They make the pieces that change interesting.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Because it creates a mental framework. It creates a context. When you're listening to a piece of music and something repeats, you go, oh, this is where I am. Mm-hmm. Right? It creates a reference point. And so, yeah, I feel like this repetitive practice it's something that it reorients you to a new set of reference points. So you started working in Florida, and things started to go better.
Yes.
Could you tell about meeting Zig?
Sure. So, I told you I'd moved to Florida. My goal was to first get a good job at a good place. I started selling health club memberships when I was, 25, 26 years old. And I got pretty good at it. I'm not sure exactly why it just was a match, but it was a match. I guess I enjoyed the gym and helping people and healthiness and all that kind of thing. And that's when I got promoted 4 times. First I was just selling memberships. Then they wanted me the weekend manager. Then they wanted me the weekday manager. And then they gave me a set of clubs. But they wanted to move me out to Plano, Texas. I was so green, I actually asked the CEO, I said, well, where in plain old Texas would you like me to go? He said, no, dummy. The city's called Plano. So I ended up in plain old Texas. I ended up in Plano and was running several clubs there. And I remember I was teaching one morning how to conduct yourself when you're selling memberships and show people around and be appropriate in your conversation and those types of things. And it was all Ziglar related. It was all his materials. And I did about a 2-hour teaching. I went back in my office and I sat down, and a few minutes later, one of my employees runs in the office and says, Chris. I'm like, what's up? Hey, you got to take this next guy around the club and show him the club. And I'm like, I just spent 2 hours teaching you guys specifically how to do this. Why in the world would I do it? He says, you don't understand. And he slid a driver's license across the desk to me. And I looked down and it said, Zig Ziglar. And I looked at him and I said, is this a fake? Like, what are you doing here? What's happening? He said, dude, I don't know what to tell you, but apparently Zig lives in Plano and he needs a health club membership, and we figured you'd kill us if you didn't go sell it. So I had this huge lump in my throat. I was nervous, really, really nervous. I mean, I was going to meet my hero. This guy literally changed my life without even ever talking to him. He changed me. And I said, all right, Patterson, man up. So I went out there and I thought, I'm just going to follow the script. I'm just going to do exactly what Zig taught me to do. And I did it, established rapport and found out what his needs were, matched his needs with the solutions, and we ended up back in the closing room. Well, I decided to use one of his closes called the alternative choice close. So the alternative choice close is basically also known as the witch close. So Mr. Ziglar, here's two options. On the left side, you can pay monthly for $45 a month and have all the amenities, or you can save yourself 15% by paying it upfront for 3 years. Which would you prefer? Well, as soon as I said that, he had these glasses on, and he was kind of looked up through the top of them, and he looked at me and he said, son, you know who I am, don't you? And then I turned into a Justin Bieber fan. Ah, of course I know who you are. You changed my life. Oh my gosh, I was in Canada. I was a loser. Now I'm winning. Da, 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 So I told him the whole thing. He said, well, you did a fine job. I think you make more money on this one, so let's go ahead and sign up on that option. I said, all right, thank you, sir. Yeah, I said, is there anything else I can do to help you, Mr. Ziglar? He said, actually, Chris, he said, I'd really like to have a personal trainer 3 days a week. I said, Zig, I'll make you a deal. You can't refuse. He started laughing. He said, what's that? I said, listen, I will work on your physical fitness 3 times a week for free if you'll spend just 1 hour a week working on my mental fitness. And that's how I got the great Zig Ziglar to mentor me. Probably the best negotiation I've ever had in my life, still to this date, because learning from him and being around him as much as I was for that year, whether it was at the gym or listening to him speak in various locations or going to lunch, I suppose by osmosis and just being in his presence, I really started to understand how life worked and how to act and behave and to think and feel. And the results all came from that too.
By the time you'd met him, you'd probably learned an awful lot. You'd probably learned a lot about the world. But what's the difference of this, the context of a relationship, right? You're with this person. You've learned a lot of his lessons. I'm sure that you get it, right? Yeah. But what's the experience? What happens when you're with somebody that can influence you?
Yeah, so several things. I mean, the first thing is when you're reading a book or you're listening to audio, it's great. People are typically sharing their very best wisdom as they can because they want it to be valuable. I've written a book. I want it to be valuable. So have you. But it's one-way communication. Two-way communication improves things dramatically if you can have access to somebody and ask them questions. And now you can get perspective. Okay, you said this in your content, and this is what I'm dealing with. Is there a match in between these two? Help me figure this out, right? That's coaching, right? That's coaching. So I went from learning, being informed, to then being coached, which was completely different. And there's a third element. I think the third one is observation. When you can observe how a man treats people over and over and over again, when you can observe a man go through a hard time and deal with it effectively and appropriately, responding versus reacting, when you can even have some interaction with that person. And there was a couple things I overstepped my boundaries with Zig because I was like so excited. I had access to Zig.
Yeah.
And I would ask him for little favors. And he would have to respond to me and say, Chris, we're friends. I've already said no 4 times. You start to learn how to behave.
Yeah.
You start to learn how to conduct yourself. You start to absorb his DNA, so to speak. So I think there's a huge difference. And, I love YouTube, and I love all the information and all the podcasts and everything else. But there's such a massive difference between just taking in that one-way information and actually collaboratively going through it with a coach or a mentor or somebody in that fashion.
So you've now accomplished many things, and you're continuing to accomplish, and you're doing more and more coaching of others. You're helping other people.
Yeah.
Do you have any experience you could share of that same dynamic? Me and working with you, of course, have developed great respect for you, and I'm sure that the other people that you work with, same thing happens. And what's an experience of this rapport that you've seen play out? Because I know it happens all the time.
Sure. My coaching students often become friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. I don't put myself in, a holier than thou position or anything. I love people, and I want to be a part of people, So I have had the opportunity with several of my students where they became more friends than just a coaching relationship. Probably the one that stands out most is a gentleman named Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler is now UFC fighter, top 5 in the world. Certainly one of the most exciting fighters on the planet. But when I met him 12 years ago, he was a wrestler kind of breaking into MMA and doing well, but not really sure of his future. And it turned out I liked him. And it turned out we got along really well. And so for 12 years, I've been his mindset coach. And I've watched him go from really being somewhat of a shy, somewhat introverted young man to really coming into his own. And it's not all about the sport. He's grown as a man. He's become mature. And humbly, I would like to admit that he's shared with me many times that he has observed how I handle things. And that changed how he handled things. So, I do think that, those three, get the information. Yes, that's great. Get the coaching, which is good. But if you can also be around that person and absorb whatever information comes that's not in the books, that's not in the coaching program, that's just the best level you can possibly be at. That's truly when you have a mentor, right? I think that's the difference between a coach and a mentor. A mentor is somebody you have access to, you can walk around with. A coach is somebody you call and ask questions and you collaborate. Both are valuable, but I think the mentorship is really what's valuable.
I agree. I'd like to. All right, so now we move on to the more exploratory stuff. So, you mentioned maturity. I think that we're in a time where a lot of people have struggled to develop maturity, and a lot of people actually want to develop maturity. For my personal opinion is we've sort of lost a lot of traditions of passing down in, say, families, communities. I think a lot of that has weakened. And so, young people today are sometimes just going, well, how do I be an adult?
Right.
I see that a lot where, people want to, but they're struggling. So I'd love to just open up the question. What are your thoughts on what maturity is?
I think maturity is being better tomorrow than you were today. It's kind of the 1%, get 1% better every day, and your life is completely different in a year. And it never stops. I still look up to my dad. He's the most mature person I know, and he's always been the most mature person I've known, and he's always been ahead of me 22, 23 years. So I really believe maturity comes through suffering, mostly. Experiences, whether they're good or bad or in between, can help us too. But when we suffer, I think that's what really grows a man. And you and I talked about this. If you're ever around somebody that's full of wisdom, you should probably stop them and ask, what kind of pain have you gone through in your life to get here? Because it's usually pain filtered the proper way turns into wisdom, right? I think one of the challenges for young people right now is, and it's always been this way, I don't want to pick on millennials or zillennials or whatever. It's always been this way. It's temporary gratification, right? Well, I want to go get my triple mocha latte with whipped cream and a cherry on top, and then I want to go to yoga, and then I want to go and watch Netflix, and I get it. It's temporary gratification that's been around forever. But I think if people are really sincerely, genuinely wanting to mature, then you've got to put the childish things aside. If you want to become a grown man, put the childish things aside. Put the video game handle down. Get in the gym. Go work. Go work, like really work for somebody. Go get a job and go, you know what, I'm going to be the hardest worker in here. You know, the old cliche, I'm going to be the first one there and the last to leave. I actually did that. What I didn't realize is I was the 1%. I was the only one in the building that wanted to do that. But I also understood the payoff too. The payoff when you discipline yourself and you put yourself into those difficult situations, you actually suffer, is maturity, rapid maturity, quickly maturing. And all the fruit is on the maturity tree. So we should probably suffer on our way there. I really believe that's going to be your best option to mature quickly, is get busy. Be hard on yourself. Life is hard. But the harder you are on yourself, the kinder life is going to be to you.
I agree. And what would you say to the people that are afraid of the suffering?
You're going to either way. You're either gonna suffer in your regret. You're going to suffer in your laziness. You're going to suffer in your unwillingness to pursue a path. You're already suffering. Pick the suffering that gives you the fruit. Pick the suffering that gives you the reward. But it's just so easy to go, I don't feel like it. Right?
It is.
It's just so easy to go, yeah, maybe tomorrow. So, you know, I've got this little exercise that I do with my students, and we go through a list of character traits, you know, honesty, integrity, and tardiness. And people have asked, they said, Chris, what is the number one trait? And, you know, I thought for a long time about this because they're all important. You know, is integrity important? Of course. You know, is hard work important? Of course. But if I was to recommend any one trait that would really be beneficial for anyone, is you have to develop discipline. If you cannot discipline yourself to get up and do a couple things that you know you should do, and then do those over and over and over a period of time, or you turn the light switch on, hey, I'm disciplined today, and then tomorrow I'm going to turn it off, and then I'll turn it on for 2 more days, and then off for 3 more days. It really doesn't work. The one thing, I don't have a lot of gifts, but there's a couple decisions that I've made that have helped me get to where I am today. And one of those is persistent consistency. I'm persistently being consistent on the things I should do on a daily basis. And when you do it that way, it's not that hard because you're breaking it down into minute details.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to do 3 or 4 tough things today. You know, I'm going to get to the gym and I'm going to make some cold calls and I'm going to try to introduce myself to so-and-so or whatever it is. But those add up. And that's why when we can focus on 24 hours at a time and we're disciplined in each of those 24 hours, and then you combine that and multiply it over days and months and years and decades, of course you're going to win. It's just a matter of time.
I joked about this at the beginning, about saying, well, at 25, you were doing everything right. Because, you know, it's easy to make assumptions about people that have gotten a lot right, that have succeeded in a lot of ways. And another assumption is that it's always working. And so as you've described this like process of developing maturity, it's full of struggle. right? So would you be willing to share something that you've struggled with as an adult, past success, let's call it?
Yeah. I would say probably my biggest challenge in my 20s, 30s, and 40s was worry.
Mm.
It had become almost a part of me, no different than my arm. I became so comfortable in worrying every single day. Now, some would say, well, Chris, that worked to your benefit because you were so worried and you worked so hard and it paid off. Yeah, but it was worth it. Yes, I'm grateful for where I'm at, but I missed a lot of happiness. I missed a lot of moments. I missed a lot of joy. And I just didn't understand the mind. And that's why, I've spent countless hours trying to understand the mind and how it works, because my mind was out of control. Obsessive thoughts, the shoe was always going to drop. The other shoe was always going to drop. There's this constant fear. So that was probably the biggest struggle that I've had over the years, is just mentally being afraid and worried and stressed all the time. And sometimes I had good reason for it too. There's been plenty of times where my wife and I were rolling nickels and dimes on the carpet to go buy bologna sandwiches. That's a true statement. So I guess I had reason to feel that way. But what I've learned over the years is that we can operate from the inside out and not let the outside affect the in. Again, I shared with you typical masses thinking. Most people are looking at their circumstances. They're looking at the bank account. They're looking at the job they don't want to go to. They're looking at the angry wife or husband that they've got. And they're looking at the kids that are all miserable and sick. And those are external circumstances. But we can control our external circumstances by choosing to operate from the inside out. For me, operating from the inside out is knowing what I want and using my higher faculties. So what does that look like? Well, we've been given a will to win that's internal. We've been given an imagination. We've been given intuition. We've got memory. We've got perception. We've got reasoning skills. If you can use that package of tools that every human being happens to the contrary of what's going on in our circumstances on the outside, then we can remain calm, cool, and confident in the midst of a storm. But that takes some practice, and it takes some autosuggestion, and it takes some work. But it can absolutely be done, and that's really what I'm most obsessed with my coaching practice, is really teaching people how to operate from the inside out and not from the outside in. And when they do so, everything seems to get better rapidly, and they also hit their goals.
Okay, there's an amazing quote. Let me see if I can find it here. Arthur C. Clarke. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. This came up, I think, maybe an hour into the cigar last night, so this seems like a reasonable time to bring it up. I've heard, I think I've heard Bob Proctor speak about this, maybe Zig Ziglar, but a couple people I've heard them refer to these mental practices, autosuggestion, repetition, etc., as technologies. And so, just overall, what are your thoughts on these ideas of manifestation, the secret, the idea of belief to create something, like utilizing just pure belief to move towards a direction? Where's your mind at with that now?
So I've been exploring a lot, trying to understand metaphysics, quantum mechanics, really more at a fifth grade level. I'm no expert. I'm no neuroscientist. However, I do believe there's a lot of people out there that are a lot smarter than me. One of those, for a fact, would be Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein said, everything is energy. This is not a matter of physics. It's not a matter of philosophy. It's a matter of physics. It's a fact. And when he's talking about energy, he's really talking about breaking things down into their most minute detail. You and I are a molecular structure of hydrogen and molecules and cells, microscopic, right? Your mass of cells is somehow communicating with my mass of cells. It's weird when you think about it, right? We're all connected in this universe. So I'm a man of faith. I'm a Christian man, but as I've explored some of the metaphysics, it really makes me wonder if this is the way that God had really created the movement of life and how things happen. So the jury's still out. I'm not exactly sure if I would put my stamp of approval on this, that, or the other.
Yeah.
But it's a fascinating topic to explore and to look at. Also, I personally, I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's an and. I think I can believe in God and science.
Yes.
Right? And some of it's not settled science. And if it's not settled, then I'm not going to be settled with it either. But I'll continue to explore it. And the way that I like to explore is, we take the law of attraction, for instance. Okay. Well, how do I do it? Well, first you have to raise your vibration. Oh, vibration. What's that mean? Well, vibration means being in a great emotional state. Love and joy and peace and happiness. That is gratitude. Those are all high emotional states. And no one would probably debate that, I don't think. What's the opposite of being in a low vibration? Well, the opposite would be, fear and guilt and shame and doubt and all these negative things, right? So, pick which one you want to be in. Well, I've noticed personally, and I've seen it with many, many other people as well, when they change their emotional state, their life changes too. When they are consistently, light switch on, over and over, every day, they're consistently in an emotional state, a high emotional state. It's amazing how their life seems to change too. People get attracted into their lives. Opportunities get attracted into their lives. And the cool thing that I've noticed about it is it comes effortlessly. Have I experienced it? I have. I've experienced it over and over. Oh, some people might say, oh, that's just coincidental. Okay. Well, you believe in coincidence. I believe I attracted it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you're wrong. I don't know. But to answer the question, I'm still exploring it. I don't have anything settled in my mind. I haven't made a decision, but I'm exploring it. Between those two interesting conversations of what is God and what is science. That's where I'm at with it.
I love it. And just thinking from a basic perspective, if there are two routes to getting something done, I can worry about it a whole bunch, or I can put myself in an amazing state and get it done.
Right.
That sounds better.
It does. I remember Zig used to say, positivity doesn't guarantee you anything, but it gives you a much better chance than negativity ever will.
Yes.
Right? So whether it's the word positive or love or, respecting yourself or whatever it is, those higher emotional states, you do have a much better chance of winning. That's just common sense. I take a miserable kid on a football team versus a kid who's the life of the party and happy as heck, and they have exactly the same talent. Well, I'm going to put my money on the happy kid. Right?
Completely agree. Chris, I love this. Thank you so much for doing this. I love how you help people, and I love how you've helped me. Where would you like to send folks online? Any of that stuff?
So pretty easy to find if you just type in @Coach Chris Patterson, and that's 2 T's in Patterson, not 3. But Uh, whoever's editing this, go ahead and add in the bum. But yeah, at Coach Chris Patterson, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, I'm on there. Feel free to reach out to me. I've got some different programs that you might be interested in. I'd love to chat with you and explore possibilities to see if they're a fit for you. But thank you, Josh. It's been a pleasure getting to know you and meeting you, and certainly doing this interview with you too.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.